The American town that disappeared overnight for most of its existence. The town looked completely ordinary. If you had driven through it decades ago, you wouldn't have stopped. You wouldn't have taken pictures. You wouldn't have thought there was anything special about it at all. It was just another small American town, the kind that existed quietly, far away from headlines, far away from history books, and far away from attention. There were houses lined up along narrow streets. There were front porches where people sat in the evenings. Children walked to school. Church bells rang on Sundays. People waved at each other because everyone knew everyone else. It was the kind of place where families lived for generations and expected to die there. Nothing about the town suggested it was temporary. And yet, today, it is almost completely gone. Not destroyed by war. Not wiped out by a hurricane. Not erased by an earthquake. It didn't explode. It didn't flood. It didn't collapse in a single dramatic moment. Instead, it disappeared quietly. So quietly that much of America never noticed. And that is what makes this story so disturbing. Because when a town disappears without warning, the question is not how it vanished. The real question is why no one stopped it. At first, nothing felt wrong. People woke up the same way they always had. They went to work. They ate dinner with their families. Life continued as usual. But beneath their feet, something had already begun to change. Something invisible. Something deadly. Something that would slowly turn their hometown into a place no one could live in anymore. The ground itself was no longer safe, but no one told them that. In the early days, there were small signs. Signs so minor that most people ignored them. A strange smell in the air. A faint haze rising from the ground early in the morning. Pavement that felt slightly warm in places, even during cold weather. Basement rooms that felt harder to breathe in than usual. People complained. Some laughed it off. Others assumed it was just part of living in an old mining town. The authorities assured everyone that everything was under control. And so, life went on. Years passed. The signs became harder to ignore. Cracks appeared where cracks had never been before. Smoke rose from empty lots. Carbon monoxide levels quietly increased. Underground, something ancient and powerful was moving, spreading, feeding, growing stronger. Still, the town remained. Still, people stayed. Then one day, the ground opened up. Not metaphorically, literally. A child was playing in his own backyard when the earth beneath him collapsed without warning. A hole opened beneath his feet, dropping him into darkness, smoke, and poisonous gas. He would have died there if someone hadn't grabbed him in time. That moment shattered the illusion. The danger was no longer invisible. It was real, it was immediate, and it was deadly. Soon after, government officials arrived, not to save the town, but to end it. They ran tests. They took measurements. They confirmed what experts had been warning about for years. The land was unstable. The air was toxic. The fire beneath the town could not be stopped. It would burn for decades, possibly centuries. The conclusion was unavoidable. People could not stay. Families were given a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Leave or risk dying slowly. Homes were bought out. Properties were condemned. Streets were closed. Entire neighborhoods were bulldozed. One by one, houses that once held memories, birthdays, laughter, and funerals were reduced to empty land. Mail stopped coming. Schools shut down. Businesses closed forever. And then something even stranger happened. The town itself was erased. Its zip code was deleted. Its name vanished from official maps. Government records became incomplete. Addresses no longer existed. It was as if the town had never been there at all. Today, only a handful of people remain. They live surrounded by warning signs that tell visitors to stay away. Smoke still rises from the ground. The fire beneath the town is still burning. Roads lead nowhere. Sidewalks end suddenly. Street names exist without streets. It feels like a place frozen between existence and non-existence. A town that hasn't completely died, but can no longer truly live. This wasn't ancient history. This happened in modern America. And the most unsettling part? There are documents missing. Decisions never fully explained. Warnings ignored. Years of silence. A whole town sacrificed because it was easier to erase it than to save it. This is the story of an American town that disappeared overnight. Not because it had to, but because no one wanted to deal with the truth beneath it. If you want, I can now continue this story deeper middle plus ending. Much darker, expand this into a 20,000-word full documentary chapter. Write the next scene for story number 2 in the same style, just tell me continue, and I'll keep going exactly like this. It's too short, please increase its length. Perfect. Thank you for clarifying. I understand exactly what you want now. Below is a much longer, deeply engaging, paragraph-only narration. Written in very simple language, slow pacing, and documentary-style storytelling. This is designed so a voiceover artist can read it calmly, and viewers will stay hooked emotionally. I will not rush. I will build atmosphere, tension, and mystery. This is still scene 1 only, the disappearance, not yet the technical explanation. 1. The American town that disappeared overnight. Opening scene, extended voiceover narrative. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about the town. It sat quietly in the American landscape, surrounded by trees, hills, and long stretches of road that most travelers passed without a second thought. It wasn't famous. It wasn't wealthy. It wasn't dangerous. It was simply home. The kind of place people ended up in, not because it was exciting, but because it felt safe. Because it felt permanent. For generations, families had lived there believing they would always live there. Children grew up on the same streets their parents once played on. Grandparents were buried in local cemeteries just miles from the houses where they were born. Life moved slowly, predictably, and comfortably. Nothing about the town suggested it was living on borrowed time, and yet, today, it barely exists. What makes this story unsettling is not the destruction, it's the silence. There was no single moment where the town's fate was announced to the world. No breaking news alert. No emergency sirens warning people that everything was about to end. The town didn't collapse in flames or vanish beneath floodwaters. It wasn't hit by a bomb or torn apart by a natural disaster. Instead, it faded. Quietly, gradually, almost politely. So politely that most of the country never noticed. In the early years, everything looked normal. People woke up in the morning and went to work. Store owners unlocked their doors. School buses followed their usual routes. Neighbors greeted each other with familiar nods and waves. Dogs barked behind fences. Smoke rose from chimneys in the winter. But beneath all of that normal life, something was wrong. Something was happening underground. Something no one could see. At first, it announced itself in small ways. A strange smell lingered in the air some mornings, sharp and bitter, like rotten eggs or burning metal. People blamed it on old pipes, old furnaces, or nearby industry. Some joked about it. Others complained. Officials said it wasn't dangerous. Then there were the cracks. Hairline fractures in the pavement. Small breaks in basement walls. Gaps that hadn't been there before. They were easy to dismiss. Old towns crack. Old buildings settle. No one thought these tiny changes meant anything serious. Life continued. As months turned into years, the signs became harder to ignore. Smoke began to rise from places where smoke had no reason to be. Empty lots, abandoned corners, gaps in the ground. On cold mornings, thin white vapor curled up from the earth like breath from a sleeping giant. Some residents noticed the ground felt warm beneath their feet, even in winter. Others complained of headaches, dizziness, or trouble breathing indoors. Carbon monoxide detectors went off for no clear reason. Still, the town remained calm. People trusted that if something were truly wrong, someone would say something. No one did. That trust would eventually be broken. One afternoon, without warning, the earth collapsed. A child was playing outside, doing nothing unusual, standing on land that had always been solid. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath him. A hole opened where there had been grass seconds before. He fell into darkness filled with smoke and poisonous gas. Screams followed. Panic followed. Miraculously, he was pulled out alive. But the damage was already done. That single moment exposed a truth no one could deny anymore. The ground beneath the town was no longer safe. After that day, the mood changed. Fear replaced routine. Parents watched their children more closely. People avoided certain areas. Rumors spread. Stories circulated about what might really be happening underground. Some said it was an old mine. Others said it was a fire. A few whispered that it could never be stopped. Officials arrived, not to reassure, but to investigate. They tested the soil. They measured the air. They drilled into the ground. What they found confirmed everyone's worst fears. Beneath the town, a massive underground fire was burning. It wasn't visible from the surface, but it was spreading silently through coal seams that ran for miles. This wasn't a fire that could be put out with water. This was a fire that could burn for generations. The experts were clear. The land would continue to collapse. Toxic gases would continue to leak. Breathing the air would become more dangerous over time. There was no realistic way to stop what had already started. The town could not be saved. Then came the decision. Not made by the people who lived there, but by people far away. The government would relocate the residents. Homes would be bought and demolished. Streets would be closed. The town would be shut down not immediately, but steadily, quietly, and permanently. Families were told to leave the only homes they had ever known. Some accepted, some resisted, some begged to stay. But one by one, they left. As people moved away, the town began to feel hollow. Windows were boarded up. Lawns grew wild. Schools closed their doors. Churches rang their bells for the last time. Mailboxes stood empty. Streetlights illuminated roads no one drove on anymore. The town didn't die in a single moment. It died slowly. House by house, street by street, memory by memory. Then came the final erasure. The town's zip code was removed. Its name disappeared from official records. Maps stopped showing it. Government documents became incomplete. Addresses that once existed were suddenly invalid. It was as if the town was being erased from history itself. Today, very little remains. A few structures, cracked roads, warning signs. Smoke still rising from the ground. The fire beneath the town continues to burn, just as it has for decades, and just as it likely will for decades more. Most Americans have never heard of this place, and that may be exactly why it disappeared so easily. This is not just the story of a town. It is the story of what happens when danger is ignored, when warnings are delayed, and when it becomes easier to erase a problem than to solve it. A town didn't just disappear, it was quietly abandoned, and then forgotten.